Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Lieutenant Aaron Abreu here, Medical Service Corps Healthcare Administrator. I'm joined today by Lieutenant Presley. He'll introduce himself here in a little bit. But before we begin, just a couple of things of explaining to you what's the purpose of the live session today. So today, this is what we plan on going over with you. We're going to talk about preparing for interview appraisals, but before we do that, just a couple of disclaimer. Our opinion is our own. It does not reflect the Department of Defense, Navy, our Medical Service Corps chief, or any organizations within the military. Like I said, these are our own opinions. We are not tied into the board members or anything like that, nor do we guarantee that you listening to us will lead you to that. So these are just lesson learned from your two lieutenants. Our agenda, we're going to do quick introductions, and then we're going to talk about real quick the MSCIPP checklist. Again, this session is not going to be spent on the checklist itself, but one of the key components of it, which is the interview appraisal. After we go over the interview appraisal and we give our 2 cents on that, we'll open it up to Q&A. So feel free to type in your questions on the chat box. Like I said, since you're not going to be able to unmute yourself or anything like that, please feel free to type that in, and then we'll go to conclusion. Before we begin, are there any questions from the group or anything that we can answer for you? All right, I'm not seeing anything. Lieutenant Presley, do you want to introduce yourself first to the group?
Yes, Aaron. Thank you. Good morning. My name is Lieutenant Presley. I am a Medical Service Corps Healthcare Administrator. I'm prior enlisted, and I commissioned through MSCIPP in the 2017 application cycle, commissioned in 2018. Currently, I work at Norfolk at Surfland, and our job there is to maintain the readiness of the ships medically that are on the waterfront. And it's a joint effort with the hospital itself and all of the medical commands within the Navy.
Copy. Thank you, LT. I'm seeing the sound is low for Lieutenant Presley. Okay, let me see if we can adjust that. All right. Can you try speaking again, Lieutenant Presley?
No problem, Aaron. Can you hear me?
All right. How's that group? Can you give us a thumbs up or if it's still low? Still a little low. All right. Let me adjust the volume on my end. All right. Hey, Chief Neely, are you able to hear Lieutenant Presley still though, in terms of you can still make out what he's saying? Gotcha. All right. Lieutenant Presley, do you have a headphone or anything like that, or earphones that you can connect? If not, not a big deal. I'll keep adjusting on my end.
I don't have earphones for this particular laptop, Aaron, but I'll try to talk louder.
Okay.
That might work.
Okay. Copy that. All right. Let me adjust volumes here. All right. I'm turning up everything on my end so you can hear all of us. All right. Gotcha. All right. So while Lieutenant Presley is getting his headphones together, well, let's go ahead and dig in with the checklist. Right. So for those of you that are not familiar, or if you have not seen this yet and you are applying this year, please tell me you are joking, because you should be looking at this point, right? So couple of things that we just want to go over. This is also available on the official MSCIPP website. This is also on our mscipp.com site, which is the unofficial one that we call. So part 1, you're going to cover letter is not required. Then you have the CO's endorsement, conditional release. At this point, a lot of you should already be submitting your conditional release or should be getting it back. I know for a fact for the corpsman community, we're getting a lot of positive responses from the ECM. For the non-HMs, I'm so sorry, I cannot speak on that. All I know is from our career counselor at Portsmouth is we're getting a lot of positive feedback, meaning approvals. In terms of part 2, it's the remaining application, right? Page 1 through 8. So remember, CO's endorsement is going to be in the part 1, and then part 2 is the remaining application. And I'm talking in the context of a 6-part folder, by the way. In terms of part 3, that's where you're going to put your interview appraisals, minimum of 3, and then letters of recommendation, minimum of 1, maximum of 4. We'll have a separate video going over the letters of recommendation, but today we're going to focus on interview appraisals. And then part 4, depending if you're doing the direct option or you're doing the training option, there is, if you're doing the direct, you need to have an accredited degree. So if you look at the program authorization, that's going to have the websites, right? You reference Healthcare Administration as an example, CEPH, CAMI, right? Your transcripts and your JST. Now, if you're applying for the training option, if using HCA as an example again, make sure that you also have the degree completion plans or acceptance letters as well. And then part 5 on here is your evaluations and also awards and descending order of precedence. And last but not the least, part 6, your security clearance, proofs of citizenship, and any addendums, certifications, or trainings that did not fit on the application. It says on here the number of addendums allowed after the package has been submitted will be capped at 5. So before, for those of you who has submitted in the past, there was no limit to the number of addendums. Now they're putting a limit on that. And from an administrative standpoint, I can see why they're doing it. And then special note from HM1 McLean on here, paperclip the medical documents, which is your 2808 and 2807 between parts 1 and 2, and do not use staples or punch holes just because they're going to have to scan that. And this is an example of the manila folder. I don't recommend buying anything expensive or anything different. If this is what's on there, just use that one. I remember when I was applying, I was trying to buy the most expensive type of folder. There's no really need for that one. But those are the 6-part, that's the 6-part folder. Any questions from the group on that one? Let me bring it back to the screen here. Right, questions. Anything to add to that, Lieutenant Presley?
I think you summarized everything. Can you hear me now?
Let's see. Let's see if people will give a thumbs up or. They said still a little low, but I think they'll be able to make it out, LT. All right, so now let's go over the appraisals. Let me get back to you on that one. Prina Celestin Day. Sorry, I don't have ranks on your screen. The question was, when are the addendums due? We'll get back to you on that one in terms, I'm pretty sure it's in the NAB admin, so we'll take a look here shortly.
Everything that's due on the 31st of July.
31st of July, including the addendums, LT? Okay, full package, copy. All right, so now let's talk, now that we went over the quick overview of the checklist, let's now dive into the appraisal. So before we kind of fillet the appraisal, and then I'll turn it over to Lieutenant Presley here, just want to share my screen on some of the resources that would be beneficial for you. If you go to our website, mscipp.com, and you click on blog and resources, where we try to put it, we don't post things just to post things. So on here, I think this is very valuable, especially if you are trying to apply. You're essentially applying for a job, right? So you want to make sure you know what's going on within Navy medicine. So I talked to a lot of prospective applicants, and it's kind of shocking that a lot of them haven't heard of this, which is okay. Sometimes they're very detached from a hospital setting, or they're not just in tune with Navy news. So on here, if you look at the leaders or readers article, we put a lot of hyperlinks on there about campaign order, what are the Surgeon General 4Ps, some Navy medicine fast facts, what's DHA, national defense strategy, so on and so forth. So I'm not going to go over this one. Then you have some MSc specific reading, talks about our history, and also the 31 subspecialties of the Medical Service Corps. Then I put on here that the goal is not to memorize. The goal of this is to understand it. But obviously, if you are being interviewed and the question is how many special subspecialties are in the MSc, and you say, oh, I'm not sure. Okay, yes, you don't need to memorize, but you probably need to know the basics, right? So I highly, highly recommend, if you are preparing for an interview appraisal, which is all of you are, please do read over this, be knowledgeable on it. Like I said, you don't have to memorize the lines on here, but you need to have an understanding. That clear, everyone, on the resources that you can have to prepare for the appraisal? Any questions for that? All right, Lieutenant Presley, anything to add to that in terms of like readings or any resources that they can take a look at?
Also, make sure you are familiar with the NAV admins, the OpNav instruction, the program authorization, because those go along with the checklist. Like Lieutenant Bray spoke to earlier, the OpNav instruction was developed in 2009, so there are some later updates and revisions of things within the package itself. What also Lieutenant Brady spoke to with the resources is being a for conversations.
Gotcha. So, just I know there were some audio stuff, but what Lieutenant Presley was mentioning, in addition to the resources, making sure that we also have knowledge about the nav admin, the program authorizations, right? And he mentioned about brilliance on the basics, very an enlisted term that's preached by our senior enlisted leaders. It's the same thing, right? Being up to date with what's going on. So making sure that you are abreast with what's going on, because as he mentioned, the OpNav instruction is very dated. So the nav admin and the program authorization is going to be your go-to for any updated information. Thank you for that, LT. All right, so now let's dive into the actual appraisal, and let me just pull this up. And the reason why I want to go over this, and I was talking to Lieutenant Presley, just because a lot of individuals, surprisingly, some of them have not even seen this, right? So this is no surprise to what you're going to be graded on. And this is the revision to Tech 2022 of what your appraisers will be looking for, right? So let's start from top to bottom on here, and I'll pause after each section, give an opportunity for Lieutenant Presley to give his thoughts as well. But starting with the personal qualities right off the bat after the interview. So if you read the second page on this, it's an instruction for the interviewers. It says, hey, don't write anything, don't be done with the interview appraisal sheet until you're done with the interview. So it's typically around at least 15 minutes, no more than 30 minutes. So that's the rule of thumb per the appraisal sheet instruction. 6 adjectives that they're going to describe you, and you're probably wondering, well, how are they going to describe me? If you look into page 2 of this, these are some of the adjectives. It's not all inclusive, but these are some things that they'll talk to you about. Good posture, careless, or unclean, or well-dressed, poised, confident, articulate. So just look at notice that they put both positive and negative adjectives on here, because this is I think of this as bottom line up front. Here's who you're going to get. So if this is who Chief Abreu is based on my perspective as the interviewer for this applicant on here. So personal qualities, they're all descriptive. Again, if you have a panel, it could vary for each panel, but know that these are adjectives that they're going to put on here. Anything to add on to that, Lieutenant Presley?
Yes. So for appraisals, the guidance should be 04 and above, and definitely have, if you do a board, someone in the community that you're trying to join on that board. If you're going to do individual appraisals, then yes, you need to seek out as many of that particular specialty that you can. It is okay to have a line officer on a board if you're going to do an MSC appraisal board. Someone that might be familiar with you, like a department head that's a Mustang, or someone from your command that is a Mustang that is a 04 and above.
Gotcha. Thank you, LT. So for those of you that kind of caught that one, line officers are all okay to have that. If you don't know, line officers actually sit the board as well. So there's no harm in having one, but it's important to have the specialty that you're trying to apply for, right? And that's what we're trying to do here in like Hampton Roads area, right? Lieutenant Presley and I, along with Lieutenant Commander Moore, we are the program coordinators for the MSc IPP here. One of the things that we are trying to do is to get the specialties in the panel. I already know what majority of the group's gonna say is like, oh, well, we don't have that formalized process here. We will try our best to connect with our MSc counterparts to whatever coast you're in. But again, Lieutenant Presley and Lieutenant Abreu and Lieutenant Commander Moore are 3 people. So we'll try our best to link you up. For the Hampton Roads area, it's easy for us because Lieutenant Presley's at the waterfront, I'm at the hospital, and Commander Moore's at the hospital as well. So we are trying to get the specialties in your board because again, you're applying for a job. Think of it as like a civilian job, right? You're trying to apply for a tech job. You don't want like a baker to interview you, right? Because the baker's opinion, not that they don't matter, it's just that how do I know that you're going to be a good, IT guy or gal if a baker is the one that gave the opinion on you? So hopefully that makes sense. I know it's kind of like, all right, baker technologist, but it's same thing with a bunch of HCAs giving their opinion on you as a social worker, right? How do we know your clinical side? Because administrator and social worker are kind of different. All right, so let's go over to the next section on here. Going back to the screen. Next one is they're going to talk about 1, 2, 3, 4 significant areas that they're going to grade you in, right? Let me see. I think all right. So first one is appearance and poise. So what does that tell you? To me, that tells me right off the bat that you probably have to, not probably, you should be ready uniform wise, fresh haircut, making sure that your uniform standards are on par with what the uniform regulations are. So your appearance is good to go. Oral communication and expression of ideas. This is where practicing comes into play. How do you communicate your ideas? A lot of people are like, oh, what if I say a lot of ums or anything? This is not supposed to feel like a seal of the quarter. And some officers will tell you they want it to be a conversational. They just want to make sure that you can express your thoughts, right? Because as officers, you're going to speak a lot in front of people, and oral communication is a big part of that. So they're going to grade you to that. And how do you become good at that? you need to make sure that you are read up on things, right? It's how are you going to speak on Defense Health Agency or the Navy campaign order if you never opened anything about it? So you are not expected to be a subject matter expert, but you are definitely expected to at least know what's going on, because tomorrow you all can be commissioned as ensigns and lieutenant JGs. So there's no ifs, ands, or buts. They want to make sure that you're ready. Anything to add to that, Lieutenant Presley?
Yeah, so just on the note of like how do you prepare for the interview appraisal itself, we definitely recommend that you sit with some lieutenants at your command and do some mock interviews, as well as do some practicing in the mirror, just talking, thinking about a question that may be potentially asked and practicing what your response would be to the question. Typically, you're going to have a majority, well, I would take that back. You probably have half knowledge questions, but majority of it will be based on your opinion on something in the Navy. So, you know, a particular topic or a particular idea, or how you would handle something as a division officer or a officer in general or a leader. So you want to think about some of the problems that you've experienced over your career, and go back and talk to your chief and talk to your divo and your department head and say, hey, for that scenario we had, how do we arrive at that decision? What kept you up at night? What were the things that were important to you to think about and getting the goal met? So that way you can understand how your scope or your title and leading the sailors went from one level to the next, from you to your chief to your divo, and vice versa.
That's great. I love that you brought that up, LT, about talking to your chiefs, your current chiefs who've dealt with divos or your current divos, because they've already experienced some real world examples of how to lead. Right. And that's, I think, a very underutilized type of experience that we just ever see. Right. Some of us, and I'm speaking from experience, some of the mentees that I've talked to in the past, oh, yeah, I do have a Divo, but they don't know anything about MSCIPP. It doesn't matter. A Divo is a leader, regardless if they are the line officer or an HCA. They do have real world experience that you will experience as well in the future once you are commissioned. So thank you for that, LT. That's actually a very, very good point. For Mr. I'm sorry, Rollins, do you have any example questions that they have asked in the past? Yes, we'll circle back to that in the very end once we're done with all the appraisals, but I appreciate that question. All right, so let's continue with our appraisal. So next is leadership potential, right? And this is, again, all this is based on that person interviewing you. They're grading you from unsat all the way up to outstanding. So leadership potential could be a mix of the scenarios that they'll throw at you, or possibly the evaluations that they have in front of you as well, right? And kind of piggybacking or alluding to the question that Rollins posted is, what are some example questions? Be prepared to have some leadership questions on there, right? It's not always going to be MSC specific. So I remember specifically for mine, and I'll let Lieutenant Presley speak on his experience. What was asked of mine is, hey, you are the division officer of your department, and you are being investigated. You're not you, but someone within your division department is being investigated. Equal opportunity concerns. There's possible complaints of bullying and some hostility. What are some things that you might do as the brand new Divo, because you don't know your team yet? You just got installed as a new division officer. How would you approach that? And that came from a captain, MSC, and he was putting me in that scenario that I'm brand new Divo. So to me, looking back now, he's testing my leadership potential if I know how to approach that, right? Do you know the current instructions for equal opportunity, right? Or at least do you know how to get that? And again, there's no right or wrong answer, but it does test your ability to lead. Anything to add to that, Lieutenant Presley?
Yes, so I'll just get one question I was when I applied. And so every interview appraisal was different. Some questions I hadn't even thought that I'd be asked, but um, one question I was asked was, a sailor comes to you that works for you, or doesn't work for you, that has a problem, and you're the first person they talk to. So what are your left or right limits with that sailor? How do you effectively let the sailor know that you're there to help them, but stand in your role as an officer, and maybe their divo or even not their divo? What do you do?
Yeah, no, that's very good. Is putting you in awkward scenarios and situations as well, because we will all be there. I've been there, to where some of the people you'll be, probably most of you won't get orders to your next command until 3-4 months out after commissioning. So you might be the temporary divo of your peers who were just your peers yesterday, former peers, I should say. So how would you approach that? Because you're no longer a petty officer first, second, third, or you're no longer a chief, senior chief, master chief. How are you going to approach that subject? So these are very good scenarios that can potentially be asked of you. And then the last one on the appraisal sheet, the last one there, what they're going to evaluate you in terms of potential as a naval officer, says on there your willingness to have the individual serve under your command when commissioned, right? So again, a very subjective evaluation criteria, right? But what is the likelihood of them wanting you to be a peer of theirs, right? If you have been following MSC IPP Facebook group, Mo Taylor used a very good analogy of how the MSC community is built. And again, this is opinions of Lieutenant Aaron Abreu. It's almost like a brotherhood, sisterhood, a fraternity, sorority kind of concept, right? Everyone knows everyone, and if they don't, they will ask, right? So those of you that approach us, and I'm going to be upfront with you, if Lieutenant Presley and I always talk, hey, did this person hit you up? Any thoughts real quick? I'm reading over the application, because that's just how it is, right? You're trying to get a feel what's on paper, but the in-person is also different. And they get that through the appraisal, through that like contact, whether it's virtual or in person. So I think that criteria right there is a very important aspect of, and it's not just built right then and there, because I can guarantee you right now, and Lieutenant Presley, correct me if I'm wrong, 90% of the time before you even step foot on that, they've already asked people if they get an advanced copy of your package. They've already asked other MSCs in your area, or if you've name dropped us, they probably contacted us as well, right? And said, hey, Aaron, what do you think about, EMC, insert last name, right? So that's just my 2 cents on that. That's why it's important during your networking phase, right? When you're getting to know individuals, you're starting to build that rapport with MSC officers. And please do not misconstrue that as you sucking up, right, to other officers. No, it's literally genuinely getting to know them, because these are going to be your peers. All of you in the call right now, all 18 of you can be our peers like tomorrow. So it's important that you're comfortable communicating with us. Thoughts on that, Lieutenant Presley?
No, you're exactly right, Aaron. Oftentimes, I'd say 3 to 4 times a week, either an applicant reaches out or a leader reaches out and says, hey, can you look at this and give me an honest review of what you think? 9 times out of 10, I'm not the only officer on that. And all of us take whatever time we build into our schedule to give an honest assessment, because one, we want to give that leader tools they can use. And two, as peers, we want to identify the best and the brightest that potentially can be peers of ours. And also, the community is large, but it is intimately small. So I pick up the phone and I call and say, hey, this person works with you in your area, in your command. Tell me anything you know about them, or you signed this fit rep for this sailor. What kind of sailor were they, or are they? That way I can kind of shape in my mind ahead of, outside of what I see in the package, who you really are. So that's something that usually a board member will ask you when they're interviewing you. or when they're writing a recommendation, beyond what I can see on paper, who are you? So that's your opportunity to really sell yourself. So there's always three things I tell folks if they're going to send me something for an interview to set up for them or to take a look before they interview. One, I ask them for the full package. I cannot do anything and make a full assessment without all the data. Two, I always ask them who's their HCA or their PA or EHO mentor, because it's important to me to involve that person in the loop as well. And the third thing I asked them for, do you have a resume? Do you have a biography? And do you have a business card? Because oftentimes those are things as officers that we should always have available. And then whenever we go to a networking opportunity or an event, we have those things because, there's a huge crowd of folks and there might be a few leaders in the room that can give you undivided attention. So if you have those things prepared, the person may say, hey, send those as a read ahead at a minimum, and that gives them a little bit of background about your history.
No, I love that is being prepared in this networking opportunities, right? So for those of you that heard the words CV, bio, right? If you've never touched those or created one, we provided a sample for you in our website, mscipp.com. Go to file share. It's on there already. Start drafting those up. Get a bio photo, a professional one. Get a CV done because like you said, like Lieutenant Presley said, I'm the same way. I ask of that with those applicants who want to apply, because again, it gives me a general idea in addition to the package of who you are. And sometimes you'll have to read outside the evaluations, and your CV is a good summary of that. And I'm gonna tell you right now, once you're an officer, because all of you will be one eventually, once you're an officer, any job you apply for will require a CV. It doesn't stop just because this is not a Lieutenant Presley and Lieutenant Abreu pet peeve. It's really not. All of the every job that I've applied for, any position I apply for, my CO, XO, detailer, you name it. Hey, send me your PSR, your fit reps, and a CV and a bio. So good. It's a good practice, really. And that's what we're trying to prepare you for. So thank you for that, Lieutenant Presley. Appreciate it. All right. Then the last part here, let me share my screen and then we'll open it up to Q&A, and I'll turn it over to Lieutenant Presley for some thoughts and then Q&A. But if you look at on here, there's three more sections that they actually four sections, right? There's the comment section where they're going to put about, I think, 6-7 lines on here. Says here, a summary statement evaluating the applicant is required. So if they put an extreme rating, meaning they put a 10 on, let's say, or an outstanding on your leadership potential, they have to talk about that on here because obviously, they think you're the next best thing. So they need to be able to articulate that. And then the motivation is the next part. How motivated you are to program. How do you exhibit this? You exhibit this because you are read up on it, right? So a lot of people get stuck with, well, I'm going to be a social worker, so that's all I care about. You have to remember, and Admiral K speaks on this a lot, the medical service corps community is so special because we support each other, all 31 specialties. Eventually, at some point, there will be some touch points. So program motivation to me, right, if I'm the one interviewing you, to me is you're reading up on the others as well. And how do you do that? The rudder, the resources that we just talked about, right? The rudder highlights a specific specialty, and there's about 4 or 5 pages per specialty on there. So if you go to the Facebook or the Mill Suite and you look up all the rudders, I can guarantee you right now, all of them have been probably talked about already at some point. So that's, to me, you're motivated for the program, right? And then the technical knowledge says here for LDO CW applicants only. This is a new section that wasn't done in previous. But the last part on here is potential as a career naval officer, right? So this is, if you remember your personal statement, this is how I tie that in, is they ask you, what are your personal and professional goals, right? To me, when you ask Aaron Abreu, that to me says, okay, does this applicant know what they want in the next, because you have a 10-year payback. So regardless, if once you get accepted, do you have something lined out for you? Are you looking at the career roadmaps for your specific specialty, right? And if this is the first time you're hearing about career roadmaps, that's available in MIL Suite, MIL Suite. I'll type it in the chat here a little bit. Each specialty has a career roadmap. If you want to be a POMI, a comptroller, a PA, and each pay grade, it kind of walks you through what is the expectation. And the way that I can put this in enlisted terms is the ladder, right? So the officers have that version in terms of career roadmaps. So that's how they know that you're thinking ahead, right? Gone are the days where you just think about the now. As a future officer, you have to think ahead. And Lieutenant Presley can tell you both our jobs. He's a planner at Surfland. I'm a planner at the region. It involves a lot of thinking ahead, not just because of our jobs, but because that's the expectation as an officer. Any additional thoughts and comments on that, Lieutenant Presley?
Great points, Aaron. The only thing I would add is so applicants in those sections for the potential as a career officer and program motivation, a lot of that comes out of your personality when you're speaking. Smile. It is okay to smile. It is okay to have those moments where the board members say something funny or you say something funny that you laugh. It's not a DRB. It's not a Sailor of the Year or Sailor of the Quarter board. It is simply a interview application, like you said earlier, Aaron, like you're going to Google or Apple or some other Fortune 500 company. People are trying to get to know who you really are. And a lot of that has to do with, one, you being a sailor, but also being a human being. What's your background? How did you join the Navy? What have you done over your career? One thing I always tell people too, all the communities speak a different language. So if there's something you use like in the air community as an acronym, someone in the medical field may or may not know what that is. So speak clearly. Do not use too many acronyms because you can get people a little lost. And try to read and gauge the audience as you're speaking. So if people are giving you that kind of face, then they may not be understanding what you're communicating. But also along those lines, as far as your potential, you have to have a plan lined out for the next 5, 10, and even 20 years. Because we want to identify people who, yes, want us into the officer ranks, but clearly know where they want to go so they can help others and junior sailors as well. If you don't have that lined out, just simply start thinking about, over the next 5 years, if this happens, what do I want to do after it happens? Because you're going to have your ceremony, it's going to be great. You're going to go to ODS, and it's going to be boot camp number 2. And then you're going to swim again. And then after that, you're going to go to your first command and be the newest person there. So what are some things that you want to get accomplished in and outside the Navy over the next decade? And it's that simple. And when you line those things out, really think about some things that line up after the Navy that correlate to the job you're doing in the Navy.
No, I like that. I like how planning in the next decade, right? When I was a young HMT Abreu and another Mustang told me that, in my head, I'm like, I can barely plan for like next week's field ops. I was in first med, right? It's like, I can barely plan that far out, but it's crucial, right? That you need to know where your place is going to be because naval officers are leaders, point blank, period. I don't care if you're a clinician. I don't care if you're a scientist or an administrator, you will be leaders. Sailors do not see, they see the twig, but they also see that there's a shiny collar device there, right? But they don't see what type of MSc you are. All they know is this person is a division officer. That's it, right? So you have to know and think that far out. And part of being a leader is the foresight that Lieutenant Presley was talking about. So thank you for that, Lieutenant Presley. All right. So that's the interview appraisal sheet, right? We talked about how to get ready for it. We talked about the different components to it. So we're going to open it up to Q&A and then we'll close it out. right on target here, 30 minutes. Like I said, since none of you have mics, I'll read the question to Lieutenant Presley, but please feel free to type it in there. But the first question that we already have, should we send a CV as an addendum to the package? Lieutenant Presley, you want to take this one?
The answer is no. The CV and bio resume is simply for someone that is going to be a mentor or someone you're interviewing with or someone you're asking for a recommendation letter from.
Yep. So again, to reiterate that, it's a no for the CV. Use the application checklist, right? If it's on the checklist, right? And if it doesn't say optional on there, I would just stick to that, right? The more things you put on there, the more you get graded on unnecessary things. So hopefully that helped out, Kendrick. And again, I apologize if I'm not using ranks or rates because it's not listed on your titles. All right. Any other questions? This is your opportunity. All right, next one. Ellis1 Lee. Does civilian certification add value to your package? I'll take this one. Yeah, absolutely. It absolutely does. And I see Lieutenant Presley agreeing. It does add value to it. And I would say too, especially for my non-HMs in the house, I found that this is actually where you can contribute to the knowledge and the motivation, right? Your corpsman counterparts are already in the hospital setting, probably dealing with a lot of MSCs, but you, as a non-corpsman rate applicant, it showcases your motivation if you are doing certifications that are aligned to your specialty, right? So don't just get a bunch of certifications just because it sounds cool. At the end of the day, is this aligned to that? So thank you for that question, LS1. Next question, I'll give this to you, Lieutenant Presley from Celestine Day. What about honor societies? What are your thoughts on honor societies?
I think if are you talking about in terms of school curriculum? If you're like in the National Student Honor Society?
Yeah, I think that's what Celestine Day is talking. Yep, she said he or she said yes.
I think if it's a healthcare organization, if you're applying for ACA, or something clinical in that scope, or something society in the science range, then I would say yes. Those things have a specific block on your 1 through 14 pages of your application, and those go in your extracurricular activities section. What oftentimes I see is sailors will list, I'm a member of ACAG, and then I will put a question mark, probably 2 or 3, and then I'll put, what's the impact?
Mm-hmm.
So what you have to do is expand and explain. Went to 6 virtual conferences, and there were topics on this item or this item or this thing, and I actually participated in a live session where I learned about disability and veterans benefits or mental health services, something to that effect where it's a cause and an impact, just like your evaluations are written in. So don't just list something to list it, make it meaningful and put the impact and the value that's added from what you did.
Thank you, Lieutenant Presley. Lieutenant Saunders actually just commented, thank you for joining, Lieutenant Saunders. And she added on here, impact is everything, right? And I'm going to echo what Lieutenant Presley said here. Simply putting you are a member is not going to cut it, right? So is other 300 applicants. They're probably part of the organization you're in. What will set you apart is your impact to that organization, right? So it's important to what Lieutenant Presley just mentioned. How are you impacting that? Attending virtual sessions, helping out your local chapter, free plug to the local ACHE chapter in Hampton Roads, right? They need help all the time. How do I know this? Because I'm active on it, right? I'm part of the board. So when the applicants in the area says they're active, I go to my roster and I say, you haven't even attended a single one on here. And I'm gonna tell you right now, a lot of senior officers who interview you reach out to me because they know it's like, hey, Aaron, is this true that they're active? It's like, sorry, I'm gonna tell you right now, zero activity. And here's the roster. The past 3 months, nothing on there. So make sure that you're active on there, okay? All right, next question. Who should write my letter of recommendations? And I think there's different schools of thoughts on here, but I'll let you go first, Lieutenant Presley.
Okay, easy there. I always tell applicants that recommendations should come from people who know them, meaning they would have to have worked for that person, or built a relationship, mentor, mentee, been in a local chapter of some sort and did a project with the leader. Because I'll tell you right now, I went and asked this question last Monday, and it was to a commander, and I said, "Ma'am, I have someone interested in becoming what you are in the Navy. How do I get myself as a medium out of it and get them on your calendar?" And the thing she told me was very valuable. She said, "If I do not know the person, what can I write about the person? If I just know them in passing, sure, but I'd rather write a recommendation on somebody that's based on experience, based on knowledge. I'm putting my signature and reputation on the line every time I write a recommendation." And another thing is, leaders are not going to water down their signatures. So, meaning a commander, captain, an admiral, they're probably not going to write 10 to 15 recommendations. Understand that the board is going to read these recommendation letters. So make sure if you don't have that, then you have to go build it. You have to find a mentor that's a 01, 02, 03, maybe an 04 if you don't have those three, and then build your application through that person. Help them help you get into the door and the room where you can be seen and that person can connect you. The last thing I'll say about it is the recommendations. If you have everyone has an XO at their command. Everyone has, and that XO is usually an 05 or 06. So I believe, my opinion is that XO, since they're not doing the CO's recommendation, they should recommend you for the program you're applying to.
No, that's a great point, Lieutenant Presley. And like I said, our next virtual session, we'll talk about in-depth letters of recommendation. But to add on to that, for letters of recommendation, I've seen it two different things, right? People will tell you, oh, if you're HCA, do only HCA stuff. That's how I get selected. You watch the 45, I think an hour long video that we have on Facebook with Lieutenant Commander Retired Mo Taylor. He will tell you the different types of letters of recommendation that people write. There's standard, there's the throwaway one, and there's that like, okay, not too good, not too bad. And then there's the one that's reserved for the person that they actually know. Letters of recommendation is meant for someone that you've worked with, in my opinion, have worked with you, can speak on your character, right? Because the appraisal is already the interview thing of like the stranger kind of first impression. Letter of recommendation will dig deep into your, hey, I can honestly vouch of why Aaron needs to be like a lieutenant like yesterday, right? So that's where the recommendations come into play. And to share you real quick with my experience, I had my XO, like Lieutenant Presley said, my XO who was a dental corps officer. I had my program director who was a nurse corps, and then I had my commander HCA that was my OIC when they were a lieutenant at one point. So that's the type of letter of recommendation that I gave, but all of them saw or work with me one-on-one, right? So that's my closing statement for that letter of recommendation. And like I said, we'll talk more about that. All right, next question. We can add this to the package. HM2 Funderbunk is asking, we can add this to the package, like being a part of this group. So being part of the mscipp.com, this is not a group per se, right? This is just a medium to pass information. What we're talking about is actual organizations where you can make an impact. And unfortunately, we didn't have enough time, at least here in Hampton Roads, to have like a internship program, et cetera. But if you do have that, I think you should definitely add that. But no, I'm not, since we are recorded, I'm not saying that you being a part of mscipp.com should be on your package. Again, this is no different than just being part of a blog or a forum. So please don't add that on there. Okay, Lieutenant Presley, anything to add to that?
That's clear.
All right. Next one. Eric Tesh. Are the addendums the same as the amplifying documents? You want to take that, Lieutenant Presley? All right. Yeah, addendums, amplifying documents. Yes, so those are like the additional things that you have to send. That's not part of the original package. And like I said, I don't quote me on this one. I don't have the nav admin in front of me, but Lieutenant Presley mentioned everything is going to be due this time on one singular date. Beforehand, like historically speaking, they were allowing last minute things like, oh, here's 80% of my package. I'll mail out the rest by September 10th. That was allowed before. Now, thinking from an administrative perspective, I think they were just having a hard time waiting on that and things are missing out. So try to have everything once you mail out that package by the due date. So hopefully that answered your question. Let's see. Celestine Day. What is you have never worked with an HCA? Celestine Day, can you clarify your question? You said what if you have never worked with an HCA? I think that's what they're trying to ask. Do you want to take that, Lieutenant Presley?
What community would the sailor be in, for example?
Yeah, what are you trying to apply for, Celestine Day, and where are you at right now? Give us like an idea so we can kind of guide you. What command? Are you on a ship? Naval Hospital, Jacksonville. Want to answer that, Lieutenant Presley?
Say that there are a few HCAs and quite a few MSC officers at Naval Hospital Jacksonville. But if you don't see them on a daily basis, simply just have your chief or your LPO, because those are networkers. They have a mess, they have an association for first classes. They should be able to get you to the door of that leader, of that person that you're looking for. If you can't get it through your chief or your LPO, then of course your CMC knows who those officers are, and they are more than willing to help sailors who are looking for leadership and aspiring to become officers. The other thing to make sure is that you are prepared when you go meet the leaders. At that point, when you're meeting them, might be an introduction into a sit-down conversation. So make sure you have your ducks in a row and your package printed out and some things lined up, at least a bio, CV, and a resume if you're going to go that route. And sometimes, honestly, there's a chief on this forum. She met me by going to the hospital and walking around and finding officers and asking, hey, I'm applying for this particular program. I'm looking to connect with the community. So she met a lieutenant commander who introduced her to another lieutenant, and I got a phone call. And then after that, we were able to find her a mentor in the field she was looking for. So it's that simple, asking questions, being willing to be vulnerable in what you're asking, and just letting the chain of command work for you. I highly doubt it if you ask your LPO or your chief or your CMC, to connect you with someone in the field you're interested in, they won't be able to help you.
Yeah, that's a great point. Is especially so Celestine Day said she is a CVT, right? So talking to your director, department head, or chief, as Lieutenant Presley said, and asking them to link you up with an HCA would be critical. And I see you said on the chat as well that you have a mentor. That's a great start. But also being ready, as Lieutenant Presley mentioned, having your draft package with the CV bio, etc., good to go, electronic and hard copy. So when they ask, it's not taking days for you to get that, right? You're ready to like rock and roll and give your very best foot forward. So they can ask to get, if you get asked to shadow or like come in like in the next like hour or so, because these officers are very busy as well. So you want to make sure that you're ready once you ask that question for, hey, can you link me up with an HCA? So hopefully that helped out, Prina. All right, next question. ABH1BR, as a result of technical difficulties in the prims in the past calendar year 2021 was not recorded. in the system. Should we still include PFA CY 2021 in the application and memo CFL? Thank you. Thoughts, Lieutenant Presley?
I would say you should include 2023. I've seen a lot of packages without a 2023 PFA, as well as 22, 21, and 20. So if you need to write a memo for 2021, do so. You can have your CFL write the memo as well, but you definitely want that data to be captured in your application.
Yep, there you go. Thank you. All right, so we have a few minutes left. Any last minute burning questions? Like good, these are good questions, by the way. Thank you, everybody. All right, Mario Zavala, is there a preferred rank 05 and above for getting appraisals? So technically, right, the appraisal sheet, let me just go back to the appraisal sheet itself. On there, it is recommended that they are like 04 and above, right? At least here, as the coordinators, Lieutenant Presley and I are targeting senior people if there's a plethora of them, right? Certain specialties will not have a lot of like 05 and 06s. I'm gonna use PA as an example, right? So it is very understandable if you have some 04s and 05s on there. Very common in the nurse community as well. So 05 and above, yes, it's a preferred rank, but it's also understandable, especially in the area that you're in if you cannot get the 05 and above. Hopefully that helped out. All right, next question from LSC. Oh, this is a comment from an LSC Dolphin. She's basically telling the group, hey, ACHE, I think this is the one in California, SOHL, are looking for more mentees in San Diego area. This is a great way to connect more people in the community. Thank you for that plug. Yes, please join to your local ACHE chapter so you're not just an active member. All right, I think this is the last question we'll take and then we'll close it out. Eric Tesh, for the personal statement, personal and professional goals should relate to our roadmap for the next decade as an MSc officer, question mark. You want to take that, Lieutenant Presley?
One more time on the question.
For the personal statement, should the personal and professional goals relate to our roadmap for the next decade as an MSc officer?
I think they should. I think they should correlate. So, professionally and personally, some goals do overlap, but there are things that you're going to write in your personal statement because that is the thing that is going to be reviewed by the actual IPP board in Millington. So you should have those things listed there, but be prepared to elaborate on them in your interview session. So if you say you want to be the CNO and you're applying for MSc IPP, if I was sitting the board, I would ask you how you're going to do that because the CNO is always a line officer. So they should be realistic and definitive things that you've thought about, that you've done some research on. If you want to go get a master's or a PhD, be prepared to explain why you want that degree or that training and what you're going to use it for in your scope or your field. So definitely the things that are in your statement are things that are going to be asked about at your interview appraisal. I would say that probably 80% of the process for the interview is going to pull from the package itself and definitely that interview statement. Did that answer the person's question?
Was that clear, Eric? Tex? Sorry. Yes, they said yes. All right. So 60 minutes right on the dot. We're going to close it out. If you're in the Hampton Roads area and this aligns with your question, Rollins, interview appraisals are scheduled for May 10th, 11th, and 12th. Each of the specialties have a dedicated day. We are finalizing, please RSVP, but the times are between 9 to 1600. We will contact you with a specific time block once we are finalized the list of officers. So please bear with us. We are trying to gather final list of officers. So if you can block that day, that's great. Understand that some people cannot do that. More details to follow, but 95% of everything that you need is on there. Dress uniform with ribbons, how to send your package, when to send it, how many copies we need. All of that you should be seeing when you RSVP on the site. So please make sure you follow the instructions on that. If you are a non-Hampton Road sailor and you're going to drive here, as long as your chain of command approves, we have no issue on that one. But then again, the target of this group is Hampton Road sailors. But if you are in the outlying command clinic and there's just, we're the closest one, totally understandable. You might get asked why you're not reaching out to Walter Reed, so on and so forth. So be prepared for that, because I get that question a lot from captains. If why is HM2 so and so coming here? Why are they not networking with the, Northern Virginia area people? So just as a caveat to that, but I'm gonna say my closing remarks, then I'll turn it over to Lieutenant Presley. Hopefully you found this very helpful. I know we answered a lot of questions that are part of the application, but today's session was mainly about interview appraisals. Hopefully you've learned about the preparing for it, like the read aheads or the articles that you should be reading, like the leaders are readers kind of article. Please read over that one and look over the appraisal sheet. Practice with your chain of command if you can, just so they can critique you as well, even though they're not MSC officers, so that you're not nervous the day of as well. So that's my 2 cents. Stand by for more virtual sessions in the next few weeks. We'll try to do this on a weekly basis, granted that we're not bombarded with work, but appreciate your time. Lieutenant Presley, over to you, sir.
Hey, thanks, Aaron. I wanted to thank you for your time as well, for taking time out of your schedule to set this up for us. And a couple shout outs to Lieutenant Jason Electa, Mo Saunders, and Mary Anderson. Thank you for joining us. I know you can't see them or hear them, but they are here. One thing I'll leave you all with is this. I always tell people, just being a prior Navy officer recruiter like Aaron, we both were recruiters before we got picked up for MSC IPP. We saw the best and the brightest from the fleet and from the civilian world. What is important to understand is, think of it as a basket full of apples. Some are red, some are green, some are sweet, some are sour, but all still apples, right? It's just a matter of preference. Okay, so if I've never had a Washington apple or Honeycrisp apple, it's up to you, being that apple, to sell me on why that apple's good. So I call that, what's your separator? So just start thinking about that. Start thinking, in a room full of leaders and sailors around the fleet, if all things are equal, why should they pick me? Now, it's important to be humble about that approach, but also be able to sell yourself. Don't undervalue yourself. Know your worth. And then speak to those things. Speak to your journey from the time you thought this was a great idea, to the time you started going to school, to the time you still stood duty and you were a parent or whatever it was in your personal life you were trying to accomplish, how all these things came full circle to this definitive point of the interview. So I'll leave you all with that information. Check us out online. Check out the website, the mscipp.com, the unofficial site, and let us know and give us feedback. We're always looking for ways to improve what we're doing and to share those with the whole group of folks on, I think, about 5,000 followers we have there. So check it out. Let us know what we can do better and some topics that may interest you for the next session.
Awesome. Thank you, Lieutenant Presley, and thank you to the officers that dialed in. We'll make sure on the next platform that we have, this is the, what do you call this? The internal mscipp.com, but I think next time we'll make sure that we use like a Zoom or FB Live format. But we appreciate everyone's time. I know it's a Sunday, so if you're in the East Coast, good afternoon. West Coast, good afternoon, I think, or morning, wherever you're at. Enjoy your weekend. Please let us know if you have any questions, but do your research first, right? There's a bazillion information out there. I'm the type of person that will always say like, hey, are you sure you did your research on this? So thank you so much, Lieutenant Presley. Appreciate your time. We'll see you on our next live session. Have a great day, everybody.